All right, we're live. Another episode of Monero Talk. Today we're with the folks of OpenBazaar, Brian Hoffman and company. I'll have him introduce the other guys. Sorry, guys, I don't know your name off the top of my head. And I just wanted to bring Brian on. I've actually been following OpenBazaar from the very, very early days, from before you guys launched. I've always found it to be a very interesting and vital project in terms of what the crypto community is supposed to be doing. And I wanted to bring Brian on today, hear where OpenBazaar is at, where it's headed, and also would love to hear his opinion on Monero, because I believe the incentives really align with these two projects. And want to know why Monero has not yet been implemented on OpenBazaar. So, Brian, if you want to quickly introduce yourself and your team.
Yeah, sure. So over here, if you can see, is Mike Greenberg. He works on pretty much everything on the back end of what OpenBazaar is doing. So the wallet, how the app works and stuff behind the scenes. And then here is Stevie, and is it Zollo? I don't know. Zollo. Okay. Zollo.
It's an Italian surname.
Yeah, I'm not good at names, period. So I can barely say my own. But he has come on to help us with cloud infrastructure and doing different things like helping search and wallet infrastructure. So a whole bunch of really important stuff. So these are the behind the scene guys of OpenBazaar.
How you doing?
Yeah. Thanks for coming on, guys, and thanks for bringing them on. So I guess first basic question for the viewing audience: what is OpenBazaar? How would you describe the OpenBazaar project?
Yeah, so OpenBazaar is it's a truly decentralized marketplace that uses cryptocurrencies as the payment layer, and effectively allowing us to remove the middleman from like an eBay or an Amazon model. And so I think it's probably one of the first real examples of a dApp. I guess we kind of predated the term dApp, but yeah, I mean, we're one of the few apps that I think really tries to demonstrate the utility of cryptocurrencies to do something really good for the world.
Now, when people hear OpenBazaar, I think a lot of people kind of instantly think darknet markets. How is this different? How is this different than the Silk Road? Is it different, or what are the similarities and differences, and how would you describe them?
Yeah, sure. I mean, I think so. There's a lot of differences between Silk Road and OpenBazaar. Obviously, there's some technical differences. For instance, Silk Road was obviously a centralized service. It was basically just a website that matched up people like eBay does and just allowed crypto as the currency, and they ran it over Tor to be hidden. So technically it's very different from OpenBazaar, which is actually a peer-to-peer application. So there are no central servers. There's no one person that runs it. So that's the primary difference on the technical side. From a philosophical side, there is a lot of similarities between what the Silk Road was trying to accomplish and what OpenBazaar is trying to accomplish. A lot of the early writings from, I guess, Ross or whoever you believe ran Silk Road or created it, was this kind of libertarian ideology about free markets and letting the people decide what the rules and regulations of how things operate are, like giving the power back to the people. Only after time did it sort of become bastardized and turned into just a purely drug marketplace for many different reasons. But in our case, we feel like that ideology is still valuable when you think about marketplaces just broadly. Like why can't we have, instead of Amazon, who's this monolithic, like, centralized corporation that just controls all of commerce on the internet for the most part, like, why does it have to be owned by Jeff Bezos? Like, why can't it be owned by the people of the world and be open and free and controlled that way? So that's really kind of the goal here. And cryptocurrencies are just a really, really important component of making that happen. We couldn't really build that unless we had, decentralized networks, peer-to-peer networking, cryptocurrencies. Like all those pieces are required in order to build the marketplace without having some kind of centralized control.
So how did you get into, how did you start this project? I assume you started in Bitcoin, or was it that you were always interested in the concept of these open marketplaces, and with the invention of Bitcoin, you kind of saw, a way to construct an open marketplace that would be decentralized? Was it that you were already into these the concept of open marketplaces, or was it that, you were a Bitcoiner and then kind of just saw this need for creating a decentralized marketplace?
Well, the way that it happened for me was that, I was into Bitcoin early on, and then, I worked in encryption and messaging and things like that in my daily job. And I was running the Bitcoin meetup in Northern Virginia area, and was really looking for something to work on. And actually, another group of folks, the people who were working on Airbit's wallet, which is now Edge Wallet, as well as Amir Taki, who was driving the Dark Wallet effort, they did a hackathon and created Dark Market, which is the predecessor to OpenBazaar, which I wasn't actually involved with. I was just an observer like everybody else, and then they open sourced the code. And when I saw that, I kind of had this idea of what I was thinking OpenBazaar would become, that I wanted to bring to them, and I wanted to work on with them to expand that idea. And they weren't interested in really moving forward with the project. I think they had other priorities. So they kind of just like gave me the keys of the kingdom and said, we'll support whatever you decide to do. So since they weren't going to work on it, and it was just me at the time, I decided to rename it and kind of like start anew with the same idea. So I didn't actually come up with the marketplace idea, but it quickly became expanded into what we envision as and what we delivered as OpenBazaar. The initial version of Dark Market really had like very rudimentary functionality, and we kind of expanded it into this broader marketplace idea. Yeah.
Yeah, I think your first good move was kind of rebranding it as an open marketplace versus a dark market.
Yeah, the funny part is that like it wasn't, I mean, that wasn't even necessarily like the main priority. I actually looked at it and I was thinking, they had this whole dark branding going on. Like they had Dark Wallet, and then they created Dark Market, and they were looking at some other stuff. And I was just like, well, if they're not even going to be involved with it, it's probably better to just be a separate brand, so that nobody's confused. And so that's what I did. And then actually, I think at the time I was worried. I was like looking at other projects like OpenSUSE and other projects like that, like OpenSSH. And I was like, okay, this is like in the open source spirit. And then my wife is actually Iranian, so I thought Bazaar would be kind of a clever name for marketplace. So that's how it got pieced together. But yeah, it turned out well. A lot of people thought it was kind of like I was like trying too hard to make it sound legit instead of a dark net, But I think that it really it encompasses the spirit more of what we're trying to build rather than a drug marketplace,
No, I think the name is great. I think it really does touch upon some of those kind of underlying policy reasons you were talking about before, about why an open marketplace might be something that we would consider one of these fundamental rights that humans should have access to. Could you touch upon that a little bit more? I mean, recently we saw, I don't know if you saw, Jerry Betro of Coin Center released a paper basically coming out and supporting privacy coins and supporting digital cash in a very strong way. And basically, making the argument that digital cash is something that's ethically good for humanity and essential for preserving open and free societies, especially in the internet age. And do you kind of see open marketplaces similarly, fitting into that, in that it's something like digital cash, and that something that we need, especially during this internet age, the age of the Amazons and things like that. Are you seeing it being similar to the digital cash arguments that are being made?
Yeah, and jump in, guys, if you have any thoughts on this as well. But I haven't read Jerry's article. I mean, don't tell Jerry that; he'll get mad at me. But I do agree that it's needed. I'm actually good friends with both Zuko and like Ricardo from Monero, and I've talked with them for years about how we could try and do a better job of bringing privacy coins into OpenBazaar. So we did start out for a long time initially being very focused on just Bitcoin, period. And so there was not even any consideration for privacy other than we had a lot of discussions around stealth addresses and things like that that were very promising early on that Bitcoin could use to be a little bit more private. And then Zcash came along, and we tried to incorporate, well, we did incorporate Zcash into OpenBazaar, primarily because their team was really willing to work with us. Zuko dedicated some team members to help us out with that. But I will say that we didn't use shielded addresses, so we were using regular transparent addresses to do it. And there's some technical reasons for that. That would probably bore your audience unless they're super technical, but there were some reasons why we haven't implemented that. And so even though we have Zcash support, we don't really use like the heavy privacy features. And as far as Monero is concerned, we really needed multi-sig support, which didn't come into Monero until pretty recently. And so that wasn't even like on the table as an option, even though we would have liked to. And I mean, I've had many conversations with Ricardo about trying to get someone to do that, and other people, trying to get someone to come in and look, and we haven't really done that. But I do know that we are reviving our efforts to try and get Monero into OpenBazaar. There's a couple devs that are working with us to understand better how the wallet works. I don't know if you're aware of it, but we did just release a new architecture for our wallet. So we used to do like separate wallets, and you kind of had to choose which coin you supported. Now we have this thing called multi-wallet, which is more of a flexible approach to plugging in new wallets. And we added Litecoin, and I think it'd be much easier now to get Monero or some other coins into the app that way. And so hopefully we'll be able to get that done. I don't know how well it will be executed, because I don't know how complicated it is to make a Monero wallet work with OpenBazaar, but it is something that we're starting on, and I'm excited that there's people that are willing to contribute and help us do that.
I think ideologically speaking, we want to make our marketplace as coin agnostic as possible and allow the users to decide what aspects of which coins and currencies are important to them, and allow them to conduct the trade in the way that they seem best fit for their case and scenario. So this multi-wallet release that we just put out with 2.3 was a step towards that. And more generally speaking, making it possible for other coins to be able to participate on the market is I think is important. But from a technology point of view, this should be kind of an open solution, and kind of the thinking that we apply to some of our planning when we decide this coin or that coin, or this feature or that feature. Like, we don't try to be a gatekeeper necessarily. We don't want to be the gatekeeper.
Yeah, I mean, one good thing about OpenBazaar in general in terms of privacy too is that we're already pretty decentralized. Like, whereas, like if you're dealing with Coinbase, a lot of times there's like, you can track the coins into Coinbase, and then, maybe you can figure out how they're coming out. If the blockchain is not super private, it's transparent. In our case, trades are happening independently. So it's almost like two random wallets on the internet are just conducting business. Those transactions don't pass through like any servers, like where we would be seeing traffic, and even though we don't know who they are, we know where what transactions are happening. We know nothing. The people are independently reaching out to each other. So I think, adding something like Monero or like a, shielded transactions for Zcash would be like the ultimate privacy solution, I think, for OpenBazaar users. So we would love to get there. Easier said than done.
So is OpenBazaar being used for that use case quite a bit, and actually in terms of just kind of like trading coins?
Yeah.
Coins,
yeah. So right now we have 4 types of listings you can put on the marketplace. The 4th one and the newest one is cryptocurrency type, which basically you can accept any of our 4 integrated coins as payment for any of the coins that are available on CoinMarketCap. Generally, that's usually how we pull them in. So there's over 2,000 coins on CoinMarketCap that have a price, and the way it works is like you would say, I'll accept, Litecoin for Dogecoin. Someone would pay you the Bitcoin, and then you would have to send them the Dogecoin off the marketplace. And once they received it, then the payment would get received. So that's how that would work. So we don't really have like native in the marketplace. Like the trade doesn't actually happen in the marketplace. It happens off the market, but the actual purchasing of it happens within OpenBazaar. So that's kind of the first phase approach that we're taking to that.
So almost like a local Bitcoin, local Monero.
Yeah. So yeah, you could kind of think of it like instead of like swapping PayPal or whatever for Bitcoin, you're just swapping an altcoin off the market. Yep.
Yeah. So in terms of adding Monero, I mean, do you guys have any other technical things to add? I mean, is it that Monero needs to do some other things? I know you mentioned, the advent of multi-sig certainly got us closer. But is Monero ready to be added to OpenBazaar? Are there things on our end that kind of need to be added, or is it really just you guys now figuring out how to add it?
Would you like me to answer that?
Yeah,
sure.
Go ahead.
So I've been speaking with some of the Monero devs, and without getting too technical about it, we require the vendor, the counterparty, if you will, to be available for them to provide a key for us so that we can have this multi-sig transaction occurring. And a lot of our use cases in OpenBazaar, particularly since we launched 2.0, like the end of 2017, a big use case that a lot of the OpenBazaar users were requesting was allowing for offline transactions to work properly. So we had to create a different way of facilitating that in an offline fashion that doesn't work very well with Monero today. And so we either have to find some way to facilitate this offline scenario in this special case for Monero, or possibly make it so that the software can allow for Monero to work, but only in certain scenarios, like when both the buyer and the vendor are online at the same time. So there are a couple of specific use cases where it gets tricky. And generally, we want to make all of the use cases work well so that the user experience is consistent and that users are not surprised when they go to pay with Monero and say, oh, well, why can't I use Monero? Like Bitcoin's just fine here. And it creates a very difficult user experience that we have to try to solve. And that's a technical problem as well as a social one, because Monero users don't care that the vendor is offline. They just care that they want to make that purchase. And when you're coming from an experience like what Amazon or eBay provides, where you have that centralized provider that's handling and facilitating that transaction for you, you have a very high bar that you have to meet before users are willing to make that jump to use the experience just to have a little bit of privacy on Monero, if that's what their interest is. So there's I think a 10x experience that you have to meet per se before it really works in all of the use cases that we have.
All right.
I did a good job explaining that.
Yeah, I mean, I encourage, hopefully this video gets seen by some people in the Monero community. I'm sure it will. And like you said, I heard you've already been in talks with, Ricardo. So I know the Monero community is certainly eager to see Monero on OpenBazaar. So I hope people kind of reach out to you, the developers, and if they could help in any way they can, that would be great.
Maybe we'll implement Dash, and that will get you guys
Verge is probably
Verge. Okay, yeah.
Well, one thing I'll say to your readers, or your subscribers, if they have developer chops, we do have regular calls where we invite the community to kind of participate and find out what we're up to, and poke and ask questions. And we have a Slack that we have available. There's lots of channels that we would invite Monero developers to reach out to us so that we can kind of get their coin integrated. I think that there's an interest in our team to see that happen. And if there is anyone that has the capability to do that, they should definitely reach out to us.
Sounds good. Hopefully they do. So how anonymous is OpenBazaar? I mean, and how anonymous do you see it being in the future? Could I effectively go on and buy something anonymously today or sell something anonymously? And I know you guys are coming out with, I guess, basically apps, web apps, and apps for, native apps for the phone. Will it still be able to maintain its anonymous nature when that happens?
Yeah, so OpenBazaar is built on kind of this idea of like layered privacy. So it's not like by default you don't get put on the Tor or any of that stuff. Like you basically operate as an open node, so your IP address is exposed. If you're running Tor on your computer, or like let's say you're running the Tor browser bundle, it will recognize that you're doing so and will ask you if you would like to connect to OpenBazaar through Tor. You can also configure it to always use Tor yourself as an opt-in, and in that case, you're pretty anonymous unless you give up your information, willingly through your profile or whatever. There's a very limited set of data that's actually publicly available about any given node on the network. So obviously, if you're selling something, those listings are going to be public, because how else are people going to discover it? You also have like a public profile. So that's reachable. And then also, if people write reviews on your products or goods, those become public, although you can choose to be anonymously sourced as the person who wrote the review, so it doesn't always attach you to it. As far as like trades go and like what you're searching for and things like that, I mean, those are not tracked other than what hits the servers, and usually it's, if you're coming from a Tor address, that's what it will see. It's just like you hitting a regular website as a Tor user. So there's nothing really at risk there. The only other thing, at least on the desktop side, that we do is that we ask people if they are willing to contribute anonymous analytics, which helps us understand more about the app and how people are using it, like whether it crashes or, how, are they searching? Are they, we don't capture like what they're searching for, things like that. It's more like what actions are people taking in general before things crash or whatever. But it's opt-in, so you can you don't have to be a part of that program. But we do have a good considerable amount of people that do choose to do that. On mobile side, obviously we haven't released the mobile app yet, so well, let's hope we even get through the App Store reviews. But on that case, the mobile app is actually going to be an OB1 app, and the reason for that is because there are some trade-offs in terms of like centralization and so on, because we're trying to make the mobile app experience a little bit more mainstream friendly and more consumer oriented rather than the desktop. So you can kind of think of the desktop as like the hardcore, enthusiast is like going to go there, supports everything. You can do kind of wacky configurations, no holds barred. The mobile app is really aimed at trying to get people to become familiar with crypto, the marketplace, and like really think of it as like their home for private trade online. So, the people that are downloading Brave browser for their phone and using DuckDuckGo for searches and Signal for messaging, like those kinds of users, we want to give them an opportunity to be able to also do commerce in a private way, rather than have to use Amazon and then jump back to their privacy apps. There's no real competitor for that in terms of marketplaces.
Right. Okay. Yeah, because that's what I'm trying to understand. Like, who's your market for the apps? But I guess that makes sense. So it's, it's not necessarily that you're using what's the app called, by the way?
Haven.
Yeah. So you're not necessarily using Haven or, to go on and buy, what may be considered illegal drugs. But you're using it to preserve your privacy and how you shop. So your data isn't being collected by, some third party. Is that kind of a good way to look at it? I mean, is it, it's like, why would I use Haven versus using Amazon?
Yeah, I mean, I think the idea is that, if you want to go on and you want to sell something, but you don't want to have to register for an account, you don't want to have to attach a credit card, you don't want to have to like give up all your personal information and your customers' information. You want to just be able to, join a marketplace just like eBay or Amazon and do the same kinds of things, but like have that privacy control over your own data. You just don't have that unless you're going to set up your own website. And the reason why people like eBay and Amazon is because they don't have to do all that crap to set up, accounts, merchant accounts, do all these things, right? Like it's easy, it's out of the box for them. In Haven, you can immediately start selling and offering things and accept crypto. Like within 3-4 minutes, you have a store running on the marketplace, you're searchable, and you have a live storefront.
I mean, let's not forget that the old banked the unbanked cliche that we used to talk about as old Bitcoiners. That will literally become true, because the vast majority of people in the world don't have a bank account, and they also do happen to have a mobile phone, most of them anyway. So having that sort of access and being able to facilitate that kind of trade, I think it's a huge deal.
Yeah, that's a really good point too that didn't get brought up yet. We did a pilot in Buenos Aires, in some of the the lesser neighborhoods in the city, and we wanted them to use OpenBazaar to see, because their currency is being devalued, and we wanted them to be able to sell their goods online and try and make Bitcoin and see the value of crypto. And what we learned is that nobody owns computers. I mean, it seems kind of obvious, but like nobody has laptops or desktops, right? They just use feature phones or like, Android phones or whatever. And that's how they live. And if you don't have a mobile app, you're really just like almost invisible there. And so I think by having that mobile app as an option in those kinds of countries around the world, it's going to be like a hugely impactful move for them. I mean, there's no limitations on where or how you sell things on OpenBazaar. Like the first day we launched our 2.0 software, we were installed in over 190 countries. I don't think there's any marketplace on the internet that actually has that kind of, penetration, especially not on a day one, right? Like there's just too hard logistically to do that. But in our case, it's very easy to do so.
What are the stats that you know of? What are you guys seeing in terms of usage and downloads and sales? I mean, I guess some things you obviously don't have stats on.
Yeah, I mean, anything transaction based, we generally don't know anything about, unless it's anecdotally they're looking for help or they disclose it to us. But things we do know are public data. So like
number of listings.
We know number of listings that are available at any given time, which at this moment is around 13,000 listings. We know how many nodes have joined the network and when they show up. So right now, I mean, it kind of fluctuates pretty good amount. So we see anywhere between about 450 and 800 or more nodes a day. We've seen, I think we just hit 150,000 nodes total since 2.0.
Those are unique nodes.
Those are unique nodes on the network. That means they installed the software, got connected, and then we saw them from our search infrastructure. So there's
almost 400 people a day are spinning up new nodes.
Not spinning up new nodes, just coming on and connecting to the network.
Well, no, that's new nodes.
Oh, new nodes.
That's new nodes.
I apologize.
Yeah, that's new nodes. Yeah.
That's incredible.
Yeah. I mean, it's hard to say how much economic activity is happening on those. I mean, it could be a lot of people just trying to browse the network because we don't really have a way for people to browse or just kind of take a spin through the network other than .com. So I think, that's going to be something too that I think will be really enhanced by the mobile app because I think merchants are really motivated to download software, configure it, set up their store. They invest the time to try and start their business. Buyers don't really want to go through the same process just to buy something, right? You just go to a website, you purchase, and move on. So I think having a mobile app, you know, where you can just quickly search and buy, and there's not a huge barrier to entry, or even when we get to web, which would be even better, you know, if I could just go to openbazaar.com, for instance, and just buy and just do it, I think for the buyer end of the marketplace, that would be like a much, much, much better experience.
So what do you think's really driving it right now? What's motivating these early adopters? Is it just kind of the savings in transaction costs and there not being this middleman, or?
Well, I mean, I think that there, you know, on the merchant side, there is like a really huge crisis happening on a lot of these marketplaces where people are either getting deplatformed or they're feel like they're getting screwed by fees, or like they're selling things that, you know, the marketplaces don't know how to manage. For instance, you know, I mean, even mining equipment at one point was ripped off of Amazon and eBay because they weren't sure of the legalities of that. And I mean, imagine your whole business is predicated on selling those types of devices or software or books or any of that stuff. I mean, think about the things that are like straight up banned in Saudi Arabia and you can't sell to customers just because, I mean, there's just all kinds of different weird things that are not necessarily illegal, or like they're just gray areas that marketplaces don't want to touch. I mean, we have this kind of impending realization that, like, for instance, marijuana is going to be legalized, right? Like it's like knocking on the door, but for now it's kind of in this weird limbo, right? Like Canada, it's legal, US somewhere it's legal, but not really in the federal, you know, so like how do marketplaces handle it? They just say no. They don't even attempt to try and allow people to do that. And so we're hoping, that you know, users will have the control to decide how that operates. You know, like if you're in Colorado and you're selling to people within Colorado, you should have the right to do that. You should be able to choose software that enables your business to exist because it's legal. And they don't have that opportunity. So those are some interesting cases. I kind of went on a tangent there.
No, that's a good answer. Yeah. Do you think so? Like the app. So when we have this app, do you think people will continue to use it in that way, or they'll be a little scared? And you know, are we going to see people using it to sell marijuana on the Haven iPhone app, or that might be a kind of a different environment?
Well, so I mean, there's a couple things to understand. I mean, one is OB1 and developers and nobody else has the ability to remove anything from the OpenBazaar network. If I download the desktop app and I sell heroin, for instance, like it's there. It's like setting up a website. It just exists on the internet. Now the question is, like, how do people actually get there at some point? Like, are they finding it through Google, or is OB1 promoting it as something to go and buy? Like, I mean, you have to have that discoverability. In the case of the Haven app, the primary discovery mechanism is going to be through OB1 search, which we do filter. And so obviously we're not going to be surfacing heroin listings to the top of that marketplace. Does not mean it doesn't exist somewhere in the network. It just means that users are not going to be able to discover that content and actually get to it through any of our tools. So it's kind of a weird, you know, it's kind of odd. It's like the internet, but like you can't find everything through Google, right? Like they do remove things from their index. It doesn't mean it doesn't exist on the internet. It's this very, very close analogy to what's going on with OpenBazaar.
That's very interesting. So what do you kind of guys see as being next steps? I guess obviously, you know, the app. What else is in the pipeline?
Yeah, so I mean, in general, for us, we have three pillars of success. One is the desktop app, obviously. One is the desktop, one is the mobile, and one is the web. Those are the three areas we're focused on. The mobile app is very much impending. It's like we're very close to getting that released. We're doing testing and finishing that up. The web is a little bit further off. We're trying to do something that I think nobody else has really cracked that nut. So when you talk about dApps, generally people are talking about Ethereum dApps, and then they're also talking about basically a thin website that talks to like Infura or some kind of API based service, and it uses MetaMask as like a wallet. It doesn't, all it is kind of a thin client to this app logic that exists in a smart contract. In our case, we're actually going to be embedding all of the peer-to-peer networking, the server logic, all that stuff's going to reside within the browser. And so there will be no need to have a plugin or like an install or anything like that. It will just run natively in the browser wherever you are. And that's great because that means none of your data is stored on any of our, anything that we can be looking at. It's all truly decentralized. And that is a very hard thing to accomplish with today's technology. We lean heavily on IPFS, which is like a distributed peer-to-peer networking and data storage network. And they're just on the cusp of getting some of this stuff working, and we're working really closely with them to push the envelope here. So I think towards the end of the year, we're going to see some really, really interesting things on the web that no one else is really doing, and we're hoping that we'll be able to get OpenBazaar in a web experience that feels just like you're working on Amazon rather than some kludgy desktop app like a lot of these things are. So those are our big focuses. And then also something we didn't talk about, we do have a token that we're going to be doing, and we're not doing a sale. We're going to do things a little bit differently than others. We're really using the token as an incentive mechanism. It's like an opt-in. So for instance, merchants will be able to use it to power up listings. So if you've ever been on Instagram and like you want to boost your photo and try and get it in front of more people, it's kind of the similar thing. They'll be able to use the token to push up their listing. So if you're trying to sell a bicycle or whatever and you want to get it more visible, they'll be able to use that. And then the other function will be, we're going to incentivize people to buy and sell. So if you buy anything on Amazon, you can think of it as a rewards point. You get rewarded with the token for purchasing. If you sell something, you'll get rewarded. And we're hoping that people will turn around and use that back on the marketplace, and it will create like this rewards engine, decentralized rewards engine, which will be really cool.
Yeah, you guys never did an ICO or anything, right? I mean, you could have been one of the earliest.
Yeah, I know. And our investors remind us at every corner that we did. But no, I mean, I think as is the case with everything that we've done, we've always spent a lot of time thinking very hard about like why we do something and what does it actually contribute back to like our overall goal of OpenBazaar. Like, we're not going to just do something because we can make a ton of money, or we can just do, we can just get people to do it. Like, it has to have a purpose in the overall goal of what we're doing. So I think we've finally settled on a mechanism for how it can be used that we like feel good about. And over the next few months, we're going to be working to like incorporate that in. So
what is the funding? Or I guess you guys are funded, you have investors, and is there a business model? Like, what is the business model of OB1?
Yeah, I mean, we are venture backed. We have a pretty good stable of investors, so we're lucky. They're patient, and they're probably winning in other areas to compensate for us. But no, but I mean, realistically, I think they understand that like these crypto companies, for the most part, especially ones that are like truly trying to do decentralized stuff, are kind of far out from figuring out what is like the best business model. Like, for Coinbase, it's obvious, right? Like they're a centralized business. They're a bridge between the decentralized world and the centralized world, and they're just fee-based. It's like all very clear. For a company like ours, where we're trying to remove the middleman, you have to kind of like flip the script a little bit and think like, well, what is the opportunity for revenue there? Like, maybe there isn't, maybe there is. How is it? Is it through tokens? Is it this? I mean, for us, we're still kind of experimenting with what that's going to be. And I think it's going to look, more like a hybrid approach. So there'll be some things that we do that look like a traditional business. For instance, the mobile app may have in-app purchases for some things, in order to monetize the mobile app. And then in other cases, it may just be that we're trying to promote the value of the token that we release, and we're holding tokens and trying to drive the value of that asset up. So it's not super clear exactly what that will be, but we're trying to figure that out.
How about things like Uber and Airbnb. I mean, you guys are basically building this marketplace. Do you envision kind of eating into those markets as well? You know, you always hear like, you know, these things may get disrupted by blockchain technology. I mean, if you guys are building this marketplace, can it apply to other things like, you know, the Ubers and Airbnbs of the world?
Yeah, so I think you know, I mean, right now it's all the rage, these services marketplaces, right? Like the Uber for whatever. And I mean, the value proposition there is that they manage the supply and the demand, right? Like it doesn't matter if, you know, like when somebody comes to pick you up in an Uber, you don't have to think much about who it is that's picking you up other than the rating, right? Like Uber abstracts that all away from you. OpenBazaar would have a hard time doing that at this point, the way it's structured. But I would love to see in the future someone use what we've got as like kind of the underlying architecture for that. Like they could definitely use that as the springboard to build a service like that, and they would have a lot less work to do because the payment's there, the discoverability is there, the mechanism for doing the market exchange is all there. You know, they could easily layer GPS discoverability, you know, something like that on top of it and create kind of a user interface that does an Uber. It's hard to say whether that will happen or not. I think that kind of thing happens when you start to get a massive scale on the marketplace and people start wanting to invest time building those services because the audience is there. We're not quite there yet, obviously.
What Brian was saying earlier was that we're pre-revenue because we're putting so much time into building up this infrastructure. Like we're effectively creating a protocol for trade, and finding the initial use case is interesting, you know, and that's part of the approach that we're taking with Haven, is having an actual product that we can start exploring some of those business models. But we fully expect that on the open source side of things, this technology will evolve into an actual trade protocol or a toolbox of protocols and languages and libraries that allow and facilitate this private and free trade that, you know, could work on top of the internet or can work on top of other existing technologies. It should be complementary to the landscape of technology.
And that being said, I did book a taxi in Shanghai through OpenBazaar, so it wasn't as real time as Uber, but you know, I mean, the seeds of something like that are there, and it's definitely not an impossibility.
Yeah, I mean, it definitely seems like a market ripe for disruption. I know everybody's, you know, it's always been mentioned, but I mean, the amount of money that the middleman is taking there it seems like a big slice of pie. So let me see what other kind of questions I had here. Talked about the bit. I guess if you guys don't mind, you mind talking about Monero a little bit? I mean, I would love to kind of hear more of your background, of how each of you guys got into crypto. If you don't mind, you don't have to divulge too much. And you know, like I said in the beginning of the interview, I think there's a ton of overlap between kind of like the ethos of OpenBazaar and what you guys are doing and building this protocol for trade, and obviously Monero trying to be digital cash. What do you guys think about Monero? What do you guys think about digital cash? And I would just kind of love to hear you guys, you know, rap on that a little bit.
I mean, I'm very different compared to most of my colleagues because I'm more of a maximalist. So in my opinion, eventually everything will converge into one currency. But we're just living in a great time where we can experiment with different technology. And Monero is definitely one of the interesting ones because obviously there's a lot of difference between it and the Bitcoin and anything else, basically. So
I think, you know, one of the things that fascinates me so much about Monero as a not just as a currency but as a project is just the uniqueness of how it's managed and the motivations of the people involved in the community. Because, you know, a lot of people compare and contrast it to Zcash, which is, you know, you have this Zcash Foundation and you have this, you know, Zcash Inc. or whatever their company, you know, Zcash company. And you have Zuko and like there's, you know, all this. And then on the Monero side, it's like you feel like you don't really know too many of the developers. They're pretty, you know, fairly not like out there. And, you know, other than Fluffy Pony, who, you know, whenever you talk to him, he's like, look, you know me, but I'm not in charge of Monero, you know, like he's always backing away from that characterization, and I think yet somehow things still get done, and they're doing such fascinating work. I mean, like just the things around just being able to take CryptoNote and ring signatures, and then actually getting the multisig done, which so many projects promise they're going to build something like that and then never do, and they actually delivered. And I remember using Monero very early on, and just how crazy complicated it was compared to Bitcoin. Like, I mean, just looking at I can't even remember what the Explorer was, but like one of those early Monero Explorers, and it was just like so much on the screen, and like, I mean, you couldn't even decipher what the hell was going on. You just assumed that it was more private, I guess, if you weren't like deeply involved. And it's gotten so much better. I mean, I just recently downloaded the My Monero wallet, and I was like, damn, this is actually like a really good user-friendly way to use Monero. And I just admire the project a lot. I really like Ricardo a lot too. I've had a lot of conversations with him about what they're doing, and I think it's a project that like I look up to in terms of like sticking to their ideals and like really trying to deliver something differentiating in a marketplace full of crap that just doesn't do anything but tweak a few parameters. They're just really going out of the box and doing something different. So
yeah, I really think that's the key thing here, because there's so much opportunity in this space for improving how we exchange value back and forth, that it's very easy to reflip one of these existing coins, change a few things like a color scheme, and then relaunch it and not follow through on some of the promises that you've made. And I believe that in the case with Monero, that there's a lot of longevity in the project, and that a lot of the things that have been agreed to be improved, they've actually followed through on. So it's definitely one of the projects out there that earns my respect. My perspective is a lot more utilitarian in nature, however. I feel as though we have this problem with governance and trying to manage value and transferring value from one person to another. And if you don't believe that the government necessarily is the best person that's handling and governing the way that we trade value, then cryptocurrency becomes a lot more interesting to you. And back in 2011, when I first started poking at Bitcoin, I could very easily see not just Bitcoin, but cryptocurrency generally being an obvious improvement for how we change the way that we exchange value back and forth. I mean, much in the same way that we've moved on from rye stones and bags of salt. Like there are limitations to each of these types of mediums of value, transferring value back and forth, and it's certainly time and right for changing that and upsetting that.
Do you guys think this stuff needs to be private and fungible on the core protocol level, or what's your opinion on that? I mean, especially I would love to hear from the Bitcoin maximalist. Bitcoin has yet to add, certainly isn't fungible, and it's not private, and there seems to be the meme going around now that it doesn't want to become that because it values the fact that it's audible and more than making it private and fungible for security purposes. So I'd love to hear you guys' thought on that. I mean, obviously, I think digital cash needs to be fungible. But,
the whole "it's too difficult to do" argument is what you're saying.
No. I think it's probably going to be one of the next major debates. I don't know if you'll probably cause another hard fork, maybe going down the road, but I think we're too early to really say at the moment. It really depends on what the sort of technical depth into introducing that sort of change. I mean, will it be taproot? Will it be confidential transactions? It really comes down to how complicated the change is. But in principle, yes, I would definitely want a sort of core layer fungibility aspect to it. Yeah, but it's also good to have the choice as well. So
yeah, I agree. I mean, I do worry a little bit about the ability for Bitcoin to change too much. I mean, I think people are starting to get into this idea that like a lot of this stuff needs to happen elsewhere, like different layers, or like, you know, Grin, or like these other ideas. You know, will it happen within Bitcoin? I don't know. Maybe you know, like I was at Satoshi Roundtable and there were a lot of arguments from people that were saying that like, oh, you know, Grin may overtake Bitcoin as kind of what it should have been. You know, it can do Lightning, it can do privacy, it can do all these things, and you know, I don't know if that's realistic or not, but I think people want privacy, and you know, as long as these chain analysis firms, you know, exist, that are going to continue to try and learn more and more about what we're doing, and they're going to get better and better at it. I mean, they already have. I mean, they're doing things so well already. I can only imagine a couple more years where they're going to be, and so we have to actively be working on adding those privacy things. I don't know if that's going to happen at the core Bitcoin layer. It may happen higher up, or I don't know. I mean,
at the same time, there's some really interesting projects going on with Wasabi Wallet, for example, or what the Samurai guys are doing as well. They're doing a bunch of really innovative sort of fungibility improving things at that wallet layer. So they've got Stonewall, for example, on Samurai Wallet, which looks pretty cool. And so that's Wasabi Wallet as well. So I mean, at the moment, we can probably win that battle against chain analysis, but it's just we'll have to see what happens in the protocol layer.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's going to be a cat and mouse game forever, because, you know, I mean, there was a time when we thought that like tumbling coins, you know, 5,000 times would actually be effective, and now the analysis companies like see through that so quickly. Like they can see coins going into exchanges and coming out and figure out where they're going based on patterns and stuff. And so I think, especially with the way machine learning and artificial intelligence and all that stuff is going, it's only going to get harder to hide from that. But your point goes right to like what I'm saying is like, maybe this stuff happens at the wallet layer, and like we're always innovating there rather than trying to change what Bitcoin is. Like maybe you don't need to. Maybe it is something that we're always doing on the client side. I worry about consistency there. I mean, Samurai Wallet is doing all kinds of crazy stuff. I mean, they have a stealth wallet scheme or stealth address scheme that we were looking at implementing, and it was just so complicated. I'm not sure that they were even doing it properly, but I don't know. But like, you know, I think it's very cool that people are trying that stuff. And I think we need to have a little bit of like separate, you know, chains that are actually doing stuff baked at the lower levels and trying to figure that out. And there needs to be some exploration at higher levels as well. So
if technology's history has anything to say about this, we see this approach all the time, and having different features handled at different layers of the technology. We're still, I mean, for all intents and purposes, 10 years is a long time for technology, but we have to remember that cryptocurrency is still quite young as far as a means of exchanging value or storage of value, or, you know, handling tokens, whatever your use case happens to be. And whether or not that privacy happens on the first layer, or if it happens, you know, somewhere up the stack, I think that really is dependent on the use case and how important it is. And, you know, for all of the experiments that are going on right now, I wouldn't be surprised that if that layer one privacy is really important to you, you'll find a way to transact that way. But if it's not, perhaps Lightning Networks is enough. You know, maybe they find some way to do that at the third layer after Lightning gets figured out. But, you know, this is a long journey that we have. And I'd say from a utilitarian point of view, use the thing that makes sense for your use case, if you can. That's kind of why, you know, OpenBazaar is as important as it is, because there aren't enough use cases out there. And having some place to be able to exchange your cryptocurrency in the means that you want to is the key important thing.
Very cool. I guess one thing, one last topic we didn't discuss. We'll go back to OpenBazaar for a second. Is just, I guess, the legalities. You know, obviously it's, you know, it's decentralized software, but there's kind of that gray area. How are you guys navigating that? And you know, how you guys covering your asses with that? Is it just that it's this decentralized platform, so it's, you know, whatever happens on OpenBazaar is kind of out of your control, or what legal grounds are you guys resting on there?
Well, I mean, obviously we haven't tested any of these in court for any reason.
I'm not a lawyer.
Yeah. I mean, at this point, the only thing that we're providing is open source software that people can download and run on their machines. We don't facilitate anything. We don't manage anything. We don't hold funds. We don't really do anything in terms of like making our users do anything or like helping them execute it. It's just a tool. So that's how we look at it. It's almost like a freedom of speech kind of thing. It's just open source software. Now, when Haven comes out, obviously that'll probably be a little bit different, just because, we're going to be in the App Store and we're going to have to be a little bit more responsible for the stuff that gets displayed through our app. They're much stricter, and so that will be a new challenge. We think we're ready for that. I mean, we've already started to build our search engine to be flexible enough to support filtering and things like that would be necessary to help us manage that. I mean, we've been approached by the FBI. They ask questions. I think that they still haven't fully wrapped their head around what kind of a challenge this type of software would be for them. I don't think that they're particularly worried at this point either, though, because when you look at low-hanging fruit in terms of targets, I think there's still so many centralized darknet marketplaces and things like that most of the commerce is happening on, that they'd rather focus on that. And so I think that this challenge could become much more important if we grew to a much bigger size. It's definitely it's more severe at scale. But at this point, I mean, we're trying to do things that like keep us as much out of the trade, out of the commerce activities as possible, not just for legal reasons, but just because, we want this to truly be decentralized. The more we get involved, the more responsibility, the more actions, the more things we have to like be responsible for. So
there's an interesting conversation that's happening right now that's trying to decide whether or not the writer of a smart contract is responsible for the actions of that smart contract after the writer has published it on the internet. And I think that that's kind of at the crux of this conversation here. And it's a very slippery slope, because we have decades of software that we've been building upon that has created problems for us, arguably, that has had real monetary impact. And I'm not just talking about the cryptocurrency faux pas that we've seen. I'm talking about real fiat big bank faux pas. And we've set the precedent already that we've released the developers of that software from those responsibilities, those liabilities. It's the bank's responsibility in some of those cases to ensure that the operation of their software is within the parameters that they expect. Is that the same case when you're running on an open source piece of software on a publicly agreed upon ledger? Everyone has accepted that this smart contract language is acceptable to be executed on your computer, but intrinsically by running the software. So are you at risk or at fault for being party to that by just running the software? It gets very complicated.
Well, I think this is kind of going back to like the Jerry Brito article. I'm sure included a lot of this, which is that. And in this case, a lot of discussion between Monero and Zcash and how they contrast. I know that Zuko's gotten a lot of like criticism for the way that he's approached privacy, whereas there's this whole like view key kind of thing where you give the government the ability to look at your transactions if you want, but it's like an opt-in kind of thing. I don't know. Is that the way that you get out of this? I mean, does OpenBazaar have the ability for people to, to like basically give like a break the glass kind of thing where, most cases is private, but like if there's an emergency, then they can see something? I mean, like, is that acceptable? I don't know. I think those things are going to get tested in the future, and like we're going to find out what the legalities are. But as far as I understand, the statement that came out or whatever that talking about smart contracts, I think it was a little overreaching, but I think the idea was if you're creating smart contracts whose sole goal is to try and circumvent law, are the writers at risk, right? Like if I create a smart contract in order to facilitate illegal gambling, I mean, and that's its only real use. I mean, you're creating a utility, you're facilitating the illegal activity. But if we're creating a smart contract that enables people to do broad commerce online, that may that huge Venn diagram may, you know, have overlap with drugs, but it's not a drug tool per se. And so I think that, you know, the way that we're building this marketplace is it's a tool to facilitate privacy in commerce, not to facilitate illegal activity.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it really comes down to is code covered by free speech? Is it free speech? Is writing code free speech? If it's not, then I guess, you know, we'll have to sort of derive. I don't think there's really any laws that say that it's not. So,
I mean, and that's different all around the world though too. You know, like here it's been tested and like, yeah, code is free speech, but you know, laws change. There's other things in other parts of the world. You know, like if we put out software that gets people in jail because it's breaking the law, I mean, that's like an issue for our users as well. So, yeah, there's a lot of concerns there.
Is OpenBazaar at the point where it is kind of its own decentralized beast? I mean, obviously, like Bitcoin, if it was decided tomorrow that it was illegal, the whole point is it would be almost impossible to shut it down, no matter what the law is. Will OpenBazaar reach that point? Has it reached that point where it would be very difficult to stop it?
I think that I probably wouldn't argue that it's like fully resilient, like a cockroach in a nuclear war, but I do think that, like, you know, for instance, the source code would probably get obliterated from GitHub. So how would users get it? I mean, but then you argue there's thousands of people that have the source code and could put it somewhere else and like continue going. And then there are people that already have the software installed and they could just continue operating as is. We do have like seed nodes. I mean, Bitcoin's no different, right? Like you have to have a way to bootstrap onto the network. If those nodes go away, how do people get on the network? Well, it wouldn't be easy, but they could find other people to bootstrap and get on. So yeah, there are a lot of ways that, like, theoretically it would be resilient. In other ways, practically, probably would be hard for it to survive, you know? So yes and no, but I think for the most part, there's not a lot of ways that they could like obliterate OpenBazaar like overnight. Like Silk Road, like they turn the servers off, they close out they, you know, recapture the domain name and it's gone forever. I mean, just to be gone. You know, that can't happen with OpenBazaar.
I mean, arguably it goes back to the whole free speech thing, right? Once you have the genie out of the bottle, it's just very difficult to just put it back. Because once Bitcoin's white paper was released in 2008, it was already too late. There was really nothing that no jurisdiction could really do to stop the idea. It's just an idea ultimately. So the moment that someone created permissionless money, that was already it.
Yep, it's true.
Well, I'm a big believer, and I think you guys are doing good work, positive work, ethical work. You guys are on the right side of history. You're simply building a tool. You're building a protocol for trade, which is a nice way of describing it, the way you guys have been describing it. And I think ultimately, if in balance humanity is better than it is worse, then when you build tools like these, then you know good things will ultimately come from them, and the good's going to outweigh the bad. And you know, thanks for working on the project. I wish you guys you know, luck in your venture. Like I said, Brian, I was following you from the early days, and I'm impressed on how far you guys have taken it so far. Yeah, I really hope that Monero could be added, and the Monero community could help you guys in whatever way you need to kind of make that happen.
Well, thank you so much for having us and appreciate your support. And yeah, we feel the same way about Monero. So hopefully we can close the door. And next year I can go to Satoshi Roundtable, and Ricardo will have to buy me some drinks with his pumped price.
All right, gentlemen. Thanks for taking the time.
Thanks for having us.
Thanks.
All right. Good night.
Bye.